Good evening, and welcome to tonight's story. My name is Jeremy, and tonight I'm bringing you something a little different. A tale of intrigue, comedy, and some very determined individuals who just can't seem to catch a break. Settle in as we follow Clark Kent, a journalist who's simply too good at his job, and the hapless CIA agents tasked with eliminating him, for reasons that are, let's say, less than stellar. Before we dive into the story, let's take a moment to relax and settle your mind. Close your eyes if you'd like, and imagine the soft hum of a city in the evening. Picture the faint glow of streetlights lining bustling sidewalks, the muffled clatter of cups in a cafe, and the gentle rustle of newspapers on desks in a lively newsroom. The world is alive with quiet energy, a perfect backdrop for tonight's whimsical tale. Take a deep breath in and exhale slowly. Feel yourself sink into the comfort of your space, letting the day's weight drift away. Another breath in and out. Let your thoughts quiet as you step into the bustling streets of Metropolis, where things are not always as they seem. Now, let us begin our story. The CIA versus Clark Kent. Clark Kent sat at his favorite table in the corner cafe, steam rising from his cappuccino. The cafe was busy but not chaotic, the perfect place for a journalist to disappear into the crowd. Outside, the sun bathed Metropolis in a golden glow, and passers-by hurried along the sidewalks, their conversations mingling with the city's ambient noise. Across the street, in a suspiciously plain van with tinted windows, 2 CIA agents watched him intently. "I don't get it," Patterson muttered, squinting through binoculars. "The man's a journalist, not a secret agent. How does he keep surviving this stuff?" Decker leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. Surviving? He doesn't just survive, Patterson. He walks away unscathed every single time. A falling piano? Not a scratch. Poisoned coffee? Didn't even flinch. It's like he's invincible. Patterson rolled his eyes. Nobody's invincible. He's just lucky. Decker raised an eyebrow. Nobody's that lucky. Inside the cafe, Clark couldn't help but smile. The agent's chatter was faint, but clear enough. Thanks to the tiny microphones they didn't realize he'd planted in their surveillance van weeks ago. Consummate professionals they were not. That morning's attempt at neutralizing Clark had involved a coffee delivery, one laced with a sedative powerful enough to knock out an elephant. Unfortunately for the agents, Clark had noticed the barista's hesitation when handing him the cup, and his enhanced senses had detected the faint chemical tang of the tampered drink. A quick switch with an innocent customer's untouched order had left Clark caffeinated, and the would-be victim wondering why they felt unusually drowsy after only half a latte. Clark sipped his cappuccino, scrolling casually through his tablet. He could sense the agents growing increasingly frustrated, their whispers escalating into bickering. "All right," Patterson said, slamming his fist on the dashboard. "We need a new plan, something foolproof." Decker snorted. "Like what? A stray meteor? An alien abduction?" Clark chuckled softly to himself. That might hit a little too close to home, he thought. As the agents continued their debate, Clark's phone buzzed. A message from Lois. "Big lead on the Senator Hart story. Meet me at the planet ASAP." Clark stood, tucking his tablet under his arm and adjusting his glasses. He glanced out the window at the van across the street. The agents had their faces pressed against their monitors, entirely unaware that their target was about to make their surveillance far more complicated. He strolled out of the cafe, the door jingling softly behind him, and turned toward the Daily Planet building. As he passed the van, he gave it the briefest of glances, just enough to make Decker and Patterson freeze in their seats. "Did he see us?" Patterson hissed. Decker shook his head, though he didn't sound convinced. "No way. We're invisible in here." Clark smirked as he crossed the street, the agent's increasingly frantic whispers fading behind him. Decker fidgeted in his seat, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest as the van's engine idled. "He's on the move," he muttered. "What now?" Patterson yanked a map off the dashboard, unfolding it dramatically as though it held some brilliant solution. "We stick to the plan," he said, tracing a line with his finger. "If he's headed to the planet, we've got enough time to set up the next attempt." Decker squinted at the map. "Is this the one with the flower cart?" Patterson nodded grimly. "Explosives hidden under the chrysanthemums. Classic misdirection. No way he walks out of this one." Decker shrugged, grabbing the keys. "All right, but if this backfires, it's on you." Clark, unaware, or so the agents believed, of the chaos brewing behind him, strolled leisurely toward the Daily Planet. As he approached the crosswalk at 4th and Main, he noticed the suspiciously oversized flower cart parked on the sidewalk. Its owner, a man in a floppy hat and an apron, was nervously arranging bouquets, glancing repeatedly at a nearby alley. Clark raised an eyebrow. His super hearing caught the faint beep, beep, beep of a timed device beneath the cart. He suppressed a sigh. Really? A flower cart bomb? He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. Pretending to check his messages, he slowed his pace, giving a pair of schoolchildren enough time to dart in front of him. They reached the flower cart just as the timer hit 0. The explosion was underwhelming. Instead of the fiery burst the agents had undoubtedly planned, the cart emitted a muffled poof, launching a cloud of petals into the air. The children squealed in delight as they were showered with brightly colored flowers. Passers-by stopped to admire the scene, snapping photos and cheering. Clark bit back a grin. Well, that's embarrassing. In the van, Decker and Patterson stared at their monitors in stunned silence. "What the hell was that?" Decker finally blurted. "Was the C4 a dud?" Patterson groaned, rubbing his temples. "No. The petals were supposed to be the distraction, not the main event. Somebody must have swapped the charges." "Who would?" Decker trailed off, his eyes narrowing. "It's him." He knew. Patterson threw up his hands. "How? He didn't even slow down until—" "Wait. Decker interrupted, pointing at the monitor. "Look at this." On the screen, Clark had stopped in front of the cart, bending down to pick up a single flower, a daisy, bright and cheerful. He held it up to the children with a smile, then tucked it into the lapel of his jacket before continuing on his way. "He's mocking us," Decker whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "The man is mocking us." Patterson slumped in his seat. "We need a new plan. A better plan. Something he won't see coming." Decker tapped his chin thoughtfully. "What about the revolving door?" Patterson frowned. "What revolving door?" "You know," Decker said, leaning forward excitedly, "the one at the planet's main entrance. We rig it to malfunction at high speed. He steps in, gets spun like a rag doll. Bam, job done. Patterson stared at him. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah? Decker shot back. Well, it's smarter than flower cart bombs. Clark reached the Daily Planet, his daisy still tucked neatly into his lapel. As he approached the revolving door, he noticed a faint smell of grease. Fresh grease and too much of it. A quick glance revealed tampering along the base of the mechanism. He sighed. Amateurs. Pushing the door lightly, he allowed it to spin once, then stepped smoothly inside, the motion perfectly timed. Behind him, 2 agents in suits who had been lingering suspiciously near the newsstand cursed under their breath. Inside the lobby, Lois spotted him immediately. "Kent," she called, waving him over. "Where have you been? We've got a deadline." "Just enjoying the flowers," he said with a smile, motioning to the daisy. Lois gave him a puzzled look, but didn't press. "Well, get upstairs. Perry's been on a tear all morning." As Clark followed her toward the elevators, he caught the faint sound of Patterson and Decker's muffled argument from outside, their voices rising in frustration. "You want to try the vending machine idea again?" Patterson snapped. Decker groaned. "Don't remind me. I'm still paying off that hospital bill." Clark stepped into the elevator, suppressing a chuckle. They'll figure it out eventually. Or not. The CIA van idled on a side street near the Daily Planet, its occupants sinking deeper into the depths of professional despair. Patterson leaned against the dashboard, glaring at the surveillance monitors that now showed Clark Kent sitting at his desk, typing away like the world's most infuriatingly ordinary journalist. "He's just sitting there," Patterson grumbled. "How does someone this boring evade every single plan we throw at him?" Decker, chewing on the end of an unlit cigar, waved a hand dismissively. "The man's not boring, Patterson. He's like a chess grandmaster, always 10 moves ahead." Patterson rolled his eyes. "It's a chessboard we built, Decker, and yet, somehow, we're the pawns." Before Decker could retort, a third voice chimed in from the back of the van. "Maybe it's time to rethink our strategy." They turned to see their tech specialist, Jenkins, leaning back in her chair, feet propped on the equipment rack. She had been quietly observing their failed antics for weeks, but now her smirk hinted at a new level of mischief. "What do you mean, rethink?" Patterson asked suspiciously. Jenkins tapped on her laptop, pulling up a blueprint of the Daily Planet building. "We've been trying to kill him with brute force. Explosives, poison, overly complicated flower cart schemes. But what if we use subtlety instead?" Decker raised an eyebrow. "Subtlety? We're the CIA. Subtlety's not exactly in our wheelhouse." Jenkins grinned. "Exactly why it'll work. He'll never see it coming." Meanwhile, in the newsroom, Clark was putting the finishing touches on his article about Senator Hart's latest corruption scandal. Lois had wandered off to pester Perry, leaving him alone at his desk. Or so he thought. A faint whir caught his attention. Clark glanced around, his super hearing picking up an unusual hum from the overhead lights. Looking up, he noticed a tiny drone hovering near the ceiling, barely larger than a hummingbird. Its camera lens gleamed ominously as it zeroed in on him. Clark sighed. Here we go again. The drone zipped downward, weaving through the newsroom with alarming precision. It hovered briefly over Clark's coffee cup before retracting a small arm tipped with a metallic needle. The arm plunged into the cup, releasing what Clark could only assume was some exotic, CIA-grade toxin. He leaned back in his chair, waiting patiently as the drone retreated to the ceiling, where it parked itself near a light fixture. With a small smirk, Clark stood, grabbed the coffee cup, and carried it to the break room. There, he poured the contents into a plant pot near the window, watching as the leaves began to wilt almost instantly. "Poor thing," he muttered, rinsing out the cup. "Maybe next time I'll bring tea." Back in the van, Jenkins stared at her screen in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." "What now?" Patterson groaned, peering over her shoulder. "The drone," Jenkins said, pointing to the live feed. "He poured the coffee into a plant. A plant? Who does that?" Decker frowned. "It's almost like he knew." Patterson threw his hands in the air. "Of course he knew. He always knows. The question is how." Jenkins sighed, slamming her laptop shut. "All right, fine. If subtlety doesn't work, maybe we go old school." Decker's eyes lit up. "Old school? Like what? A banana peel on the stairs?" Jenkins smirked. "Close. We rig his office chair. Electric shock. Small charge. Just enough to incapacitate him. He sits down, zap, we're done." Patterson snorted. "You're betting the farm on an office chair?" "Hey, do you have a better idea?" Jenkins shot back. Decker nodded eagerly. "I like it. Low effort, high reward. Let's do it." Later that afternoon, Clark returned to his desk, blissfully unaware, according to the CIA, that his chair had been tampered with. Jenkins had gone to great lengths to disguise the trap, tiny wires tucked beneath the seat, carefully calibrated to deliver a short but effective shock. As Clark approached, he noticed the faint smell of burnt plastic. A quick X-ray scan revealed the wiring, and he couldn't help but chuckle. Points for creativity, I guess. He sat down casually, shifting his weight slightly to avoid the pressure sensor. Across the street, the CIA agents leaned forward in anticipation, their eyes glued to the monitor. "Any second now," Jenkins muttered. Clark leaned back, crossing his arms as he surveyed the newsroom. "Feels like someone's watching me," he said, just loud enough for the hidden microphones to pick up. Weird. The agents froze. "Did he?" Decker began. "Shut up," Patterson hissed. "He's bluffing." But before the trap could spring, Clark accidentally knocked his chair over, the wires snapping loose with a faint spark. He grabbed a spare chair from a nearby desk and returned to work, completely unbothered. Back in the van, silence reigned. "Did he just—" Jenkins started. "Yes," Patterson groaned, burying his face in his hands. "He did." Decker stared at the screen, shaking his head slowly. "He's not human." Jenkins frowned. "Don't be ridiculous." Decker pointed at the monitor. "No normal guy dodges a flower cart bomb, a spiked coffee, and an electrified chair in one day. I'm telling you, Patterson, there's something off about him." Patterson opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips. After a moment, he sighed heavily. "All right. New plan." "Oh, great," Jenkins muttered. "What now?" Patterson grinned grimly. "We get him to slip up." The van buzzed with the energy of a new, harebrained scheme. Patterson leaned over a whiteboard hastily set up in the cramped space, scrawling arrows and circles with wild abandon. Jenkins watched from her workstation, Her eyebrow arched skeptically, while Decker furiously chewed his unlit cigar, clearly caught up in the moment. "We can't outsmart him," Patterson declared, tapping the whiteboard for emphasis. "We've tried force, subtlety, and sabotage. Nothing works. So now, we make him slip up." Decker frowned. "And how do we do that, genius?" Patterson smirked. "Simple. We create a situation so complicated, so chaotic, that no one, not even him, can navigate it perfectly." Jenkins snorted. "So what? You're going to throw him into an escape room?" "No," Patterson snapped. "We're going to create a fake national security crisis." Decker coughed on his cigar. "A what now?" "Hear me out," Patterson said, spinning the marker in his hand. "We stage an incident, something that looks like it could lead to a major scoop, a fake leak, a dossier, whatever. Kent won't be able to resist. He'll dig too deep, ask the wrong questions, and bam, we've got him." Jenkins squinted at the whiteboard. "And by got him, you mean what, exactly?" Patterson shrugged. "Depends how deep he digs, but we'll control every layer of the operation. He won't see the trap until it's too late." Decker leaned back in his chair, skeptical. "And what happens when Superman shows up? 'Cause you know he always shows up when things get messy." Patterson waved a hand dismissively. "One crisis at a time, Decker. First, we deal with Kent." The following morning, Clark found a plain envelope on his desk. It was unmarked save for a single handwritten word. Classified. He opened it carefully, scanning the document inside. It was a crude forgery of a government report, riddled with enough breadcrumbs to pique a journalist's curiosity. Clark smirked. Cute. His super hearing picked up a faint click from the bug planted in his desk lamp. Across the street, the van was alive with excitement. "He's reading it," Jenkins whispered. "Perfect," Patterson said, rubbing his hands together. "Now, let's see how far he's willing to go." Clark decided to play along. He tapped his pen thoughtfully against the desk, muttering under his breath. This could be big, really big. In the van, Decker grinned. "He's hooked." "Give it time," Patterson said, his voice tight with anticipation. "The real bait's on the next page." Clark flipped the page, revealing a set of coordinates and a date. Tonight. He raised an eyebrow, feigning interest. "A rendezvous at the old industrial park?" Subtle. He tucked the envelope into his jacket and stood, pretending not to notice the sudden flurry of activity in the van as the agents scrambled to follow. The industrial park was deserted, its rusted skeletons of machinery looming in the moonlight. Clark strolled through the empty space, his footsteps echoing faintly. From the shadows, he heard the agents whispering furiously into their comms. "He's here," Jenkins said. "All units, hold position. Wait for the signal." Clark suppressed a chuckle. He could see them easily with his X-ray vision. Patterson crouched behind an oil drum, Decker awkwardly hiding in a bush, Jenkins perched on a dilapidated catwalk. They were waiting for him to find the decoy briefcase they had planted in the center of the lot. Instead, Clark stopped, glancing around as though searching for something. "Weird," he muttered, loud enough for the bugs to pick up. "I thought there'd be someone here." In the van, Patterson slammed his fist on the dashboard. What's he doing? He's supposed to find the briefcase. "Maybe he's suspicious," Jenkins offered. "Of what?" Patterson snapped. It's the perfect setup." Back in the lot, Clark made his way toward the briefcase, pausing just before he reached it. He crouched, pretending to inspect something on the ground. Then, with perfect timing, he sneezed, a loud, dramatic sneeze that echoed across the park. The agents tensed. "What was that?" Decker whispered. "Relax," Patterson hissed. "He's probably just—" Clark sneezed again, harder this time. The sound reverberated off the metal walls, startling a flock of pigeons from a nearby structure. The birds exploded into the sky in a flurry of wings and panicked cooing. "Shit!" Decker yelped, stumbling out of his bush. The sudden commotion startled Patterson, who accidentally knocked over the oil drum he was hiding behind. The clang echoed like a gong, drawing a startled shout from Jenkins, who lost her balance and tumbled off the catwalk, landing in a pile of scrap metal with a loud crash. Clark stood, brushing off his jacket. "Well," he said to no one in particular, "I guess no one's here. Might as well head home." He strolled out of the park, leaving the CIA agents tangled in their own chaos. Back in the van, Jenkins nursed a bruised elbow while Patterson paced furiously. Decker sat in stunned silence, staring at the monitors. "He sneezed," Patterson said, his voice hollow. "A sneeze ruined everything." Jenkins groaned. "This isn't working. We're out of ideas." Patterson turned to Decker, his eyes wild. "What's next? Poisoned donuts? A runaway shopping cart?" Decker shook his head slowly. "He's not just a journalist," he muttered. "He's a force of nature." Patterson slumped into his seat, burying his face in his hands. "We're doomed." Clark sat in his apartment that evening, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. His day had been filled with the usual antics, dodging a flower cart explosion, neutralizing a spiked coffee, and accidentally causing the CIA to self-destruct one of their most elaborate traps. He couldn't help but smile as he thought about the agents. For all their competence in some areas, they were hilariously out of their depth when it came to him. Not that he blamed them. How could they possibly know they were dealing with Superman? To them, he was just an annoyingly good journalist with an uncanny knack for survival. A faint rustling outside caught his attention. He turned toward the window, his X-ray vision immediately pinpointing the van parked a block away. Patterson and Decker were in the middle of yet another heated debate, their voices muffled but easy enough for him to hear. "We need to call it off," Jenkins said, leaning against the van's console with an air of defeat. "He's untouchable." "No one's untouchable," Patterson snapped. "We just haven't found his weak spot yet." Decker threw up his hands. "Weak spot?" The guy shrugged off a piano, poison, a flower cart bomb. "What are we supposed to do? Drop a skyscraper on him?" Jenkins groaned. "Face it, Patterson. We've wasted weeks, and we're no closer to neutralizing him. If anything, we've made him stronger. The public loves him even more now. The guy's untouchable and charming." Patterson slumped into his seat, staring blankly at the monitors. "We can't just give up." "Why not?" Jenkins asked. "He's a journalist, not an assassin. Let him write his stories. Who cares?" Decker raised an eyebrow. "You've read his stories, right? The guy's a menace with a typewriter. Every article's a smoking gun. If we don't stop him now, he'll—" "What?" Jenkins cut in. "Expose us? Get us fired? Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. I'm tired of living out of a van." Patterson glared at her, but said nothing, The truth was, they all knew she was right. Inside his apartment, Clark sipped his tea, listening as the argument fizzled into an awkward silence. He could tell the agents were nearing their breaking point, and a small part of him felt guilty for toying with them. But another part, the part that enjoyed teaching lessons without violence, was almost tempted to let this go on a little longer. Almost. The next morning, Patterson, Decker, and Jenkins sat in their van, each nursing their own brand of exhaustion. Patterson was the first to break the silence. "All right," he said quietly. "We're calling it. Pack it up." Decker blinked. "Seriously? Just like that?" "What choice do we have?" Patterson muttered. "The guy's invincible. We're wasting our time." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Wow, never thought I'd hear you say that." Patterson sighed heavily. "Yeah, well, even I know when I'm beaten." The van door creaked open and the three agents froze. Standing there, with his signature mild-mannered smile, was Clark Kent, holding a box of donuts. "Morning," Clark said cheerfully. "Thought you all could use a snack." Patterson stammered incoherently, while Decker stared at the box as though it might explode. Jenkins, to her credit, managed to recover first. Thanks?" Clark set the box down on the console, his smile never wavering. "I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the attention. It's flattering, really." Patterson's jaw dropped. You knew?" Clark chuckled softly. "Let's just say I had a hunch. You might want to fix your encryption protocols, by the way." Jenkins groaned. "I told you we needed better encryption." Decker leaned back, his face pale. "What are you going to do to us?" "Do to you?" Clark looked genuinely surprised. "Nothing. You're just doing your jobs, right? Besides," he added with a wink, "I think you've learned your lesson." Patterson opened his mouth to protest, but Clark was already walking away, hands in his pockets, as though nothing had happened. The agents sat in stunned silence, watching as he disappeared into the bustling streets of Metropolis. Later that day, Clark sat at his desk in the Daily Planet, typing up his latest article. Lois leaned over his shoulder, scanning the headline. "Federal Surveillance Gone Wrong. A Story of Bumbling and Redemption," she read aloud. "Sounds juicy." Clark smiled. Just a little something to keep the powers that be on their toes. Lois smirked. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, Smallville." As he hit submit, Clark couldn't help but glance out the window. The van was gone, but he had a feeling the agents weren't done with him entirely. Not that it mattered. Whatever came next, he was ready. After all, Clark Kent had a secret. And some secrets, he thought with a smile, were worth keeping.